Can a decades-old family feud, sparked by betrayal and fueled by silence, ever truly be healed? In the heart of Iowa, amidst the rolling cornfields and under the vast, unforgiving sky, Martha Johnston, a 75-year-old quilt shop owner, grapples with the weight of a past mistake that shattered her family. When a childhood friend, David Chen, returns, carrying his own burden of guilt, their paths intertwine, forcing them to confront not only their shared history, but also a long-buried love triangle that threatens to unravel the fragile peace they've both sought. Prepare to be moved by a story of forgiveness, second chances, and the enduring power of community, where the stitches of regret are slowly, painstakingly, replaced by the threads of hope and redemption. The antique shop was a jumble of forgotten treasures, dusty relics of lives lived and loves lost. Martha Johnston, her hands gnarled but still nimble, traced the intricate carvings of a small, wooden music box. It was a beautiful piece, crafted from dark walnut, inlaid with mother-of-pearl that shimmered in the dim light. She recognized the tune instantly, a lilting folk melody that her mother used to hum as she rocked Martha to sleep, a lullaby from a childhood that felt a lifetime ago. A time before the mistakes, before the estrangement, before the heavy cloak of regret had settled upon her shoulders. She carefully wound the key, and the delicate mechanism sprang to life, the tiny hammers striking the tuned metal teeth, releasing the melody into the quiet shop. The sound, fragile and sweet, transported her back to the Iowa farm, to the sun-drenched fields of corn and the warm embrace of her family. A family that was now fractured, broken, scattered like seeds in the wind. She closed her eyes, her heart aching with a familiar pang of guilt. It had been 25 years since she'd last seen her daughter, Sarah. 25 years since a foolish argument, a careless word, had driven a wedge between them, a wedge that had widened into an unbridgeable chasm. The music box's lament mirrored the sorrow in her own soul, a melody of regret and longing. The bell above the shop door jingled, announcing a new arrival. Martha quickly closed the music box, the melody abruptly silenced, as if she were trying to stifle her own memories. A man entered, his silver hair catching the light, his face etched with a kindness that belied a hidden sadness. David Chen. Even after all these years, she recognized him instantly. His eyes, though lined with the passage of time, still held the same intelligent spark, the same gentle warmth. They had been childhood friends, growing up together on neighboring farms, sharing secrets whispered in the hayloft, dreams spun under the vast Iowa sky. "Martha?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, a hint of surprise coloring his tone. "Is that really you?" She nodded, a nervous flutter in her chest. "David," she replied, her voice a little shaky. "It's been a long time." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, chasing away some of the shadows that lingered there. "Too long," he agreed. He walked towards her, his gaze drawn to the music box in her hands. "That's a beautiful piece," he said. "The melody, it's familiar." Martha's fingers tightened around the box. "It's Down in the Valley," she said, the title a whisper, a ghost of a memory. He reached out, his fingers brushing against hers as he gently touched the carved lid of the box. The contact, brief as it was, sent a shiver through her, a spark of something she thought long dead. It was an innocent touch, a rekindled spark that triggers buried longing, a perfectly crafted hook to draw the reader further. The unexpected reunion with David stirred up a whirlwind of emotions within Martha. She had spent years burying her past, burying the pain and regret that had become her constant companions. She had focused on her quilt shop, the cozy corner, pouring her energy into creating intricate designs, stitching together fragments of fabric into works of art. But the seams of her own life remained frayed, unraveled. David, she learned, had returned to Iowa after his wife, Eleanor, had passed away a few years earlier. He'd been living in California, playing cello in a small orchestra. The loss was etched on his face, a subtle sadness that resonated with Martha's own quiet grief. They talked for hours that afternoon, catching up on lost time, sharing stories of their lives, carefully avoiding the gaping hole in Martha's narrative, the absence of her daughter. He mentioned his son, Michael, who was encouraging David to get out more, to play his cello again. He tells Martha that he even agreed to provide background at a local exhibition. The silence around Sarah's absence serves as a subtle, looming background presence. As David spoke of Eleanor, his voice filled with a gentle reverence, Martha felt a pang of envy. She had never known that kind of enduring love, that kind of unwavering devotion. Her marriage to John, Sarah's father, had been a practical arrangement, a union of neighboring farms, more about consolidating land than sharing hearts. It had ended, not with a bang, but with a whimper, a slow erosion of affection, leaving behind a residue of resentment and unspoken accusations. After David left, promising to visit her shop again soon, Martha found herself unable to concentrate on her work. The familiar comfort of the fabrics, the rhythmic click of the sewing machine, couldn't soothe the turmoil within her. She went to the back room, where she kept her personal treasures, and pulled out a large, folded quilt. It was a masterpiece, a vibrant tapestry of colors and patterns, depicting scenes from Sarah's childhood: a playful kitten, a field of sunflowers, a red barn under a starry sky. It was the quilt she had made for Sarah, a labor of love, a symbol of their bond. A bond that had been severed, leaving the quilt unfinished, a poignant reminder of her failure as a mother. Each stitch was, ironically, a step further away from Sarah. At that time it was never delivered. Martha decided to visit the old farm. It was a risky move, a step into the minefield of her past, but she felt a compelling need to reconnect with her roots, to confront the ghosts that haunted her. The farm was no longer in the family. It had been sold years ago, after John's death. But the new owners, a young couple with a passion for restoring old homes, had graciously allowed her to visit whenever she wished. The farmhouse, though renovated, still held the echoes of her past. She could almost hear the laughter of her children, the clatter of dishes in the kitchen, the low hum of John's tractor in the distance. She walked through the empty rooms, her fingers tracing the familiar lines of the walls, the worn wood of the floors, the faded patterns of the wallpaper. Each detail evoked a memory, a bittersweet reminder of a time when her family had been whole. She found herself, once again, wondering what choices had brought them there. Was it all her own fault? These nagging, spiraling thoughts, however, had to be delayed. She went outside, to the old oak tree where Sarah used to play. The rope swing was gone, but the sturdy branches still reached towards the sky, a silent testament to the passage of time. She sat beneath the tree, the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, and closed her eyes. She could almost feel Sarah's presence, a small, vibrant child, her laughter echoing through the years. The guilt washed over her, a familiar wave of self-recrimination. She had been so young then, so stubborn, so convinced of her own righteousness. She had let a petty argument, a misunderstanding, escalate into a bitter feud, driving her daughter away. She opened her eyes, and her gaze fell upon a small, weathered headstone nestled at the base of the tree. It was the grave of Sarah's pet hamster, Mr. Nibbles. Sarah had insisted on a proper burial, complete with a tiny wooden cross and a heartfelt eulogy. Martha remembered the day vividly, Sarah's tear-streaked face, her small hand clutching Martha's as they said goodbye to their furry friend. A wave of emotion washed over Martha, a mixture of grief, regret, and a longing for a connection that seemed irretrievably lost. As she sat there, lost in her memories, she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. A pickup truck, dusty and familiar, was driving up the long, winding driveway. It couldn't be, could it? The truck stopped, and a figure emerged, tall and silhouetted against the afternoon sun. A figure that stirred a flicker of recognition, a ghost from a past that refused to stay buried. It added another unexpected, urgent element, setting the scene of rising, mysterious intensity. The figure approaching was not Sarah, as Martha had momentarily hoped, but a man, his face obscured by the shadows of the setting sun. As he drew closer, she recognized him. Thomas Baker. Her heart sank. Thomas was Sarah's cousin, and the two families had been embroiled in a bitter feud for decades, a feud that had started, in part, because of Martha. Martha? Thomas said, his voice hesitant, a mixture of surprise and suspicion. What are you doing here? She stood up, brushing the dirt from her skirt, trying to regain her composure. I just came to visit, she said, her voice faltering. To see the old place. Thomas's gaze swept over the farmhouse, the fields, the old oak tree. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of curiosity and guardedness. It's been a long time, he said, his words stating the obvious, the unspoken tension hanging heavy in the air. He stepped closer, noticing something near the tree's thick trunk. What's that? He asked. Martha felt a pang of guilt. She hadn't come here to stir up trouble, to reopen old wounds. She had come seeking solace, seeking a connection to her past, seeking a way to forgive herself. But her presence here, at the heart of the feud, was bound to create complications. It's nothing, she said quickly, trying to deflect his attention. Just an old memory. But Thomas was persistent. He walked towards the oak tree, his eyes fixed on the small headstone. Mr. Nibbles, he read aloud, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I remember that hamster. Sarah loved that little creature. He looked at Martha, his expression softening slightly. She was heartbroken when he died. Martha felt a lump form in her throat. She couldn't speak, couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. The memories, the guilt, the regret, washed over her, a tidal wave of emotion threatening to drown her. Thomas, sensing her distress, changed the subject. So, he said, what brings you back to Iowa after all these years? He asked her questions about her quilt and what she had planned. Martha gave terse replies. It was clear. He did not know what had fully transpired all of those years ago. The scene closes with Thomas walking closer towards her, the reader unsure of his full reaction and his current thoughts setting an immediate and concerning cliffhanger. Martha, flustered by Thomas's unexpected arrival and the subsequent probing questions, decided to cut her visit short. She made her excuses, promising to return another time, and hurried back to her car, her heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and regret. She drove back to town, to the quiet sanctuary of her quilt shop, seeking solace in the familiar comfort of the fabrics, the rhythmic click of the sewing machine, the tangible evidence of her creativity. As she entered the shop, she heard music, the delicate strains of a cello, playing the same folk tune that had emanated from the antique music box. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. David. He was sitting in the back room, his eyes closed, his bow dancing across the strings of his cello, his body swaying gently to the rhythm of the music. He looked completely absorbed, lost in the melody, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and serenity. She watched him for a moment, unseen, captivated by the beauty of his playing, by the depth of emotion he conveyed through the music. It was as if he were speaking to her, sharing his own grief, his own regrets, his own longing for forgiveness. The music was not just a tune, but a direct form of unspoken dialogue, a heartfelt exchange. He finished the piece, the last note lingering in the air, a poignant echo of the melody. He opened his eyes and saw her standing there, a slight smile on her face. David, she said softly, that was beautiful. He smiled back, a genuine smile that reached his eyes, chasing away some of the shadows that lingered there. It's an old folk tune, he said. My mother used to sing it to me. Mine too, Martha said, her voice a whisper. She walked towards him, drawn by an invisible force, by a shared connection, by a mutual understanding of loss and longing. It's called Down in the Valley, she said, repeating the title, this time with a newfound sense of hope. He nodded. It's a song about forgiveness, he said, about letting go of the past, about finding peace. His words resonated deeply within her, a balm to her wounded soul. She had spent so many years clinging to her guilt, to her regret, to her anger. It was time to let go, to forgive herself, to seek forgiveness from those she had wronged. It was clear to Martha that the tune, the instrument, they meant so much, that perhaps now is the time to tell the truth. She hesitates, not ready. He then quickly changes the topic and invites her for coffee. A small, simple invitation sets an immediate story. Martha and David sat at a small table in the local diner, the aroma of coffee and freshly baked pie filling the air. They talked for hours, sharing stories, memories, and the quiet comfort of each other's company. Martha found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone in years, revealing her past, her mistakes, her estrangement from her daughter. She told him about the argument, the foolish words that had driven Sarah away, the years of silence, the gnawing guilt that had consumed her. She spoke of the quilt, the unfinished symbol of their broken bond, the labor of love that had become a constant reminder of her failure as a mother. David listened patiently, his eyes filled with empathy and understanding. He didn't judge her, didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. He simply listened, offering the silent support, the unspoken compassion that she had craved for so long. He, in turn, opened up about his own guilt, describing, in detail, the day of the argument with Eleanor. He was still beating himself for that one day despite Michael's assurances that it wasn't his fault. He confessed it, word for word, to Martha. The conversation, over coffee, represents catharsis for the characters. "I know how you feel, Martha," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "The guilt, it can eat you alive. But you can't change the past. All you can do is learn from it, try to make amends, and move forward." His words, simple but profound, resonated deeply within her. He was right. She couldn't undo the mistakes she had made, but she could try to make things right. She could reach out to Sarah, seek her forgiveness, try to rebuild their relationship. As they left the diner, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Martha felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. David's presence, his understanding, his quiet strength had given her the courage to confront her past, to face her fears, to seek a new beginning. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that there were no guarantees, but she was finally ready to try. She had a renewed energy not just to make things right, but a newfound determination to fully face her mistakes and live authentically no matter the costs. This resolve is challenged, however, by new thoughts of the past, triggered by spending time with David specifically, those involving another man serving as the chapter's hook. The memories stirred up by her conversation with David followed Martha home, lingering like shadows in the corners of her mind. She found herself thinking about Robert, the other man in the love triangle that had complicated her life, her friendship with David, and, ultimately, her relationship with her daughter. Robert had been a charismatic, charming newcomer to their small Iowa town, a whirlwind of excitement and passion that had swept Martha off her feet. He was everything John, her steady, reliable husband, was not. He was unpredictable, adventurous, a breath of fresh air in the predictable routine of her farm life. Their affair had been brief, intense, and ultimately destructive. It had shattered the fragile peace of her marriage, fueled the simmering feud between her family and Sarah's cousins, and created a rift between her and David, who had disapproved of her choices, her betrayal of John. She had made a choice, and it still had echoes in her current, fractured state. She recalled the day when it all fell apart. She remembered the confrontation, the accusations, the tears, the anger. She remembered Sarah's heartbroken face, her whispered words, "I hate you, Mama." Those words had haunted her for years, a constant reminder of the pain she had caused, the damage she had done. She had tried to justify her actions, to convince herself that she had been unhappy, that she had deserved a chance at happiness, but the guilt had always remained, a heavy weight on her conscience. Now, with David back in her life, with the possibility of reconciliation with Sarah, she felt a renewed sense of responsibility, a need to confront the truth, to acknowledge the mistakes she had made, to seek forgiveness, not just from Sarah, but from everyone she had hurt. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be resistance, that some wounds might never fully heal, but she was determined to try. She had to break the cycle of silence, of resentment, of blame that had plagued her family for so long. The weight of responsibility felt different, more profound. She knew that the coming days were going to require effort and courage. Martha decided to take a concrete step towards reconciliation. She wrote a letter to Sarah, a long, heartfelt letter in which she poured out her regret, her remorse, her love for her daughter. She didn't try to justify her actions, didn't make excuses, didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply told the truth, and expressed her deep longing to reconnect, to rebuild their relationship, to somehow make amends for the years of silence, of separation. Writing the letter was a cathartic experience, a release of pent-up emotions, a way of breaking the chains of guilt that had bound her for so long. But it was also a terrifying step, a leap of faith into the unknown. She had no idea how Sarah would react, whether she would even read the letter, whether she would be willing to forgive, to forget, to open her heart to her mother again. She mailed the letter, her hands trembling, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. She had done all she could do. Now, she had to wait, to trust, to believe in the possibility of reconciliation. The waiting, however, was filled with anxieties of how those other than Sarah would react. She knew Thomas would, eventually, have to be told. She wondered how he would process the news. Days turned into weeks, and Martha heard nothing from Sarah. The silence was deafening, a constant reminder of the chasm that separated them, of the years of estrangement, of the pain she had caused. She began to doubt herself, to wonder if she had made a mistake, if she should have just left things as they were, if she had reopened old wounds for nothing. She found solace in her work, in the familiar rhythm of the sewing machine, in the vibrant colors of the fabrics, in the intricate patterns she created. She also found comfort in David's presence, in his quiet support, in his unwavering belief in her ability to heal, to forgive, to move forward. He visited her shop regularly, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to play his cello, the music filling the space with a sense of peace, of hope, of serenity. He never pushed her, never pressured her, never offered unsolicited advice. He simply listened, understood, and offered his friendship, his companionship, his unwavering support. But unbeknownst to Martha, her actions were sparking changes elsewhere. A development sets the next arch. While Martha waited for a response from Sarah, life in the small Iowa town continued its gentle, predictable rhythm. The annual county fair was approaching, a time of celebration, of community, of shared traditions. Martha, as a prominent local business owner, was asked to participate, to display her quilts in a special exhibition, a showcase of local artistry and craftsmanship. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step back into the public eye, to face the potential scrutiny, the whispers, the judgments. But David encouraged her, reminding her of her talent, her passion, her contribution to the community. He also revealed that his son, Michael, had finally convinced him to overcome some anxieties to also participate. He was to provide background ambience for the art exhibition. He would be playing his cello. He convinced her that it was time to move on with life, to be visible regardless. She looked at her crafted pieces. A renewed sense of self-worth bloomed. She agreed. Martha decided to create a new quilt for the exhibition, a special piece that would represent her journey, her struggles, her hopes for the future. She chose fabrics in muted tones of sepia and cream, evoking a sense of nostalgia, of remembrance, of the passage of time. She incorporated vintage lace, antique buttons, and fragments of old letters, weaving them into the design, creating a tapestry of memories, of emotions, of unspoken truths. As she worked on the quilt, she found herself thinking about Robert, the man who had been at the center of the love triangle that had shattered her life so many years ago. She hadn't seen him since that fateful day, since the confrontation, the accusations, the heartbreak. She wondered where he was, what he was doing, whether he ever thought about her, about the damage they had caused. She wondered, and she continued to wait to hear, one way or the other. From Sarah, she was determined to not back down. The day of the county fair arrived, bright and sunny, the air filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the enticing aroma of fried food. Martha set up her booth, displaying her quilts, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She hadn't seen this many members of her old community. For many years it was both encouraging and nerve-wracking. David arrived early, setting up his cello in a corner of the exhibition hall, his presence a calming influence, a source of quiet strength. He smiled at her, a reassuring smile that eased her anxieties, that reminded her that she was not alone. As people began to arrive, strolling through the exhibits, admiring the quilts, the paintings, the crafts, Martha felt a sense of pride, of accomplishment, of belonging. She had created something beautiful, something meaningful, something that resonated with the hearts and souls of her community. But her peace was short-lived. She saw him, Robert, standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes fixed on her, a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and something she couldn't quite decipher, flickering in their depths. Their eyes meet, setting a very unexpected turn. He hadn't changed much. His hair was grayer, his face more lined, but he still possessed that same charismatic charm, that same aura of danger and excitement that had captivated her so many years ago. He walked towards her, his steps hesitant, his expression uncertain. Martha felt her heart skip a beat, her palms sweating, her mind racing. She hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for this encounter. "Martha," he said, his voice a low murmur, a ghost of a memory. "It's been a long time." She nodded, unable to speak, her throat constricted with emotion. She didn't know what to say, what to do. She was torn between the past and the present, between the love she had once felt for him and the pain he had caused, between the desire to reconnect and the fear of reopening old wounds. David, noticing the tension, discreetly steps a bit closer, protective. It was clear a scene was about to happen yet again. Before Martha could respond to Robert, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Martha? What's going on here?" It was Thomas, Sarah's cousin, his face a mixture of confusion and suspicion. He looked from Martha to Robert, his eyes narrowing, his jaw tightening. He clearly sensed the tension, the unspoken history, the undercurrent of emotion that crackled in the air. "Thomas," Martha said, her voice faltering, "this is Robert. An old acquaintance." Thomas's gaze shifted to Robert, his expression hardening. He recognized him, of course. Everyone in the small town knew the story, the scandal, the feud that had divided families for decades. "Robert," Thomas said, his voice cold, his tone laced with animosity. "I didn't know you were back in town." Robert met his gaze, his expression defiant.
"I'm just visiting," he said.
"Passing through." Thomas didn't believe him. He knew that Robert's presence was no coincidence, that it was bound to stir up trouble, to reopen old wounds, to reignite the feud. "What do you want, Robert?" Thomas asked, his voice sharp, his eyes blazing with anger. "Why are you here?" Robert hesitated, his gaze flickering to Martha, then back to Thomas. I just wanted to see Martha," he said.
"To talk to her."
Thomas scoffed.
"Talk,"
he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "After all these years? After all the pain you caused? You have some nerve." He turned to Martha, his expression a mixture of disappointment and betrayal. "I thought you were better than this, Martha," he said. "I thought you had moved on. I thought you had learned your lesson." His words stung like a slap in the face. Martha felt her cheeks flush with shame, her heart aching with regret. She had hoped to avoid this, to prevent a confrontation, to protect the fragile peace she had been trying to build. But it was too late. The past had caught up with her, the feud had been reignited, and she was caught in the middle, once again. The tense exchange, fueled by decades of resentment and unspoken truths, sets the stage for a dramatic confrontation and a deeper exploration of the feud's origins and consequences. The confrontation between Thomas and Robert escalated, their voices rising, their anger spilling over, attracting the attention of the crowd. Martha, caught in the crossfire, felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had hoped to avoid this, to protect the fragile peace she had been trying to build, but it was too late. The past had caught up with her, the feud had been reignited, and she was caught in the middle, once again. David, sensing her distress, stepped forward, placing a calming hand on her arm. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice firm but gentle, "this is neither the time nor the place for this. Let's not ruin the festivities for everyone else." His intervention, though well-intentioned, seemed to further inflame Thomas's anger. "Stay out of this, David," Thomas snapped. "This doesn't concern you." David stood his ground, his gaze unwavering. "It concerns Martha," he said, "and therefore it concerns me." The implication, clear but unspoken, hung in the air, adding another layer of complexity to the already tangled web of relationships. Robert, sensing an opportunity to deflect the blame, turned to Martha. "Tell him, Martha," he said. "Tell him it wasn't my fault. Tell him we were in love." Martha's heart sank. She couldn't do that. She couldn't betray John, her late husband, even after all these years. She couldn't betray David, her friend, her confidant, her silent protector. She couldn't betray herself, her own sense of honor, her own commitment to truth. "It was a mistake, Robert," she said, her voice low but firm. "A long time ago. It's over. It's done." She looked at Thomas, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I'm sorry, Thomas," she said. "For everything." She turned and walked away, leaving the two men standing there, their anger simmering, their conflict unresolved. She sought refuge in a quiet corner of the exhibition hall, her heart aching, her mind racing. She had hoped to find peace, to find forgiveness, to find a new beginning. But the past, it seemed, refused to stay buried. As she sat alone trying to calm down, she ponders. Why? Why now of all times did Robert show up? The lingering question becomes the driving question. Martha, shaken by the confrontation and the resurfacing of old wounds, decided to leave the fair early. She couldn't face the curious glances, the whispered comments, the judgmental stares. She needed time to process, to regroup, to find her center again. As she was packing up her quilts, David approached her, his face etched with concern. "Are you all right, Martha?" he asked, his voice gentle, his eyes filled with empathy. She shook her head, unable to speak, tears welling up in her eyes. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm, reassuring. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of here." He led her to his car, a vintage convertible, the top down, the evening air cool and refreshing. They drove in silence, the only sound the hum of the engine and the gentle breeze rustling through the cornfields. The sun had set, and a full harvest moon hung in the sky, casting a soft, silvery glow over the landscape. David pulled over to the side of a deserted country road, stopping near a small, wooden bridge that spanned a gently flowing creek. "I used to come here as a boy," he said, his voice nostalgic. "It's a peaceful place." He turned off the engine, and they sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the gentle murmur of the creek, the distant howl of a coyote. David reached into the back seat and pulled out his cello. He began to play a slow, melancholic melody, a song of longing and regret, of hope and forgiveness. The music filled the night air, a soothing balm to Martha's troubled soul. As she listened, she felt her tension ease, her anxiety dissipate, her heart begin to heal. The music was a language, a conversation, a connection that transcended words, that spoke directly to her emotions, that offered solace and understanding. She closed her eyes, letting the melody wash over her, carrying away her pain, her guilt, her regret. She felt a sense of peace, of serenity, of hope she hadn't felt in years. When he had completed, neither had said a word. The cathartic moment was perfect and pure and serves as the transition into rising romantic tension. The following day, Martha returned to the county fair, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had spent a restless night, replaying the events of the previous day, agonizing over her encounter with Robert and Thomas, worrying about the impact on her fragile relationship with her estranged family. But she had also found strength in David's support, in the memory of his music, in the quiet peace she had found under the harvest moon. She arrived at her booth to find a small crowd gathered, admiring her quilts, their faces filled with appreciation and awe. She was surprised to see Sarah's cousin, Thomas, standing near the new quilt she had created, the one with the sepia tones and vintage embellishments. He was looking at it intently, his expression unreadable. She approached him cautiously, her heart pounding with apprehension. "Thomas," she said softly, I didn't expect to see you here." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and curiosity.
"I wanted to see your work," he said.
"It's beautiful." He gestured towards a sepia-toned quilt. "This one," he said, "it's different. It feels personal." Martha nodded, her throat tightening with emotion.
"It is," she said.
"It's about my life. My regrets. My hopes." Thomas looked at her, his gaze searching, probing. "I know about Robert," he said, his voice low, his tone less hostile than the previous day. "I know what happened. What he did." Martha felt her cheeks flush with shame, but she met his gaze, determined to face the truth, to own her mistakes. "It was a long time ago, Thomas," she said. "It was a mistake. I'm not proud of it." Thomas nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I know," he said. "But it had hurt a lot of people, Martha, including Sarah." He paused, then added, She never really got over it." Martha's heart sank. She had hoped, against all odds, that Sarah might be willing to forgive her, to give her another chance. But Thomas's words dashed her hopes, confirming her worst fears. As Martha and Thomas continued their conversation, a figure emerged from the crowd, a woman with familiar features, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion.
"Sarah."
Martha's heart leaped into her throat, her breath catching in her chest. She hadn't seen her daughter in 25 years, and now, here she was, standing before her, a ghost from the past, a living embodiment of her deepest regrets and her most cherished hopes. Sarah looked from Martha to Thomas, her expression shifting from surprise to anger, to a deep, simmering resentment. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you two talking about?" Thomas stepped forward, his intention clearly to shield Martha, to protect her from Sarah's wrath. "It's nothing, Sarah," he said. "Just catching up." But Sarah wasn't buying it. She knew that something more was going on, that there were unspoken truths, hidden emotions, simmering beneath the surface. "Don't lie to me, Thomas," she said, her voice sharp, her eyes blazing with anger. "I deserve to know the truth.
I deserve to know what's going on."
She turned to Martha, her gaze piercing, accusing. "What have you done, Mother?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm and bitterness. "What secrets have you been keeping from me?" Martha felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had hoped for a different kind of reunion, a more gentle, more forgiving encounter. But the past, it seemed, refused to stay buried. The feud, the secrets, the lies, had all come crashing down around her, threatening to destroy any chance of reconciliation. She looked at Sarah, her eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. "Sarah," she began, her voice trembling, "please let me explain." But Sarah cut her off, her anger reaching a boiling point. "Explain?"
she scoffed.
"Explain what?" "How you betrayed us. How you ruined our lives. How you chose him over your own family." The him was not specified, yet Martha knew. The scene becomes the center, everything depends on the next scene. Before Martha could respond to Sarah's accusations, another voice interjected, smooth, charming, and undeniably unwelcome. "Sarah, darling, it's been too long." Robert stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Sarah, a predatory gleam in their depths. He had always had a way with women, a way of charming them, manipulating them, making them feel special, desired. And Sarah, even after all these years, seemed susceptible to his spell. Martha felt a surge of anger, of protectiveness, towards her daughter. She couldn't let Robert hurt her again, couldn't let him weave his web of lies and deception around her. "Robert," she said, her voice firm, her tone warning. "Stay away from her." Robert ignored her, his gaze still fixed on Sarah. "I just wanted to see you," he said, his voice soft, seductive. "To tell you how much I've missed you." Sarah, initially stunned by his appearance, seemed to soften under his gaze, her anger giving way to a flicker of curiosity, of something akin to longing. Thomas was fuming, almost shaking. David placed a calming hand on Thomas. "You haven't missed me, Robert," Martha said, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension. "You've never missed anyone but yourself." She turned to Sarah, her eyes pleading for understanding. "Don't listen to him, Sarah," she said. "He's lying. He's always lied." Robert turned on Martha, his charm replaced by a cold, hard anger. "You would say that, wouldn't you?" he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You always were jealous, Martha. Jealous of my connection with Sarah. Jealous of our love." Martha gasped, stunned by his audacity, by his cruelty. He was twisting the truth, manipulating the situation, playing on Sarah's vulnerabilities. "That's not true, Robert," she said, her voice trembling.
"And you know it."
She turned to Sarah, her eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, please," she pleaded. "Don't believe him. He's trying to hurt us, to divide us again." The layers of emotions hang, like a thick fog. Sarah is silent, unsure, and untrusting of all three. Sarah, torn between her mother's pleas and Robert's manipulative charm, looked from one to the other, her expression a mixture of confusion, anger, and a deep, abiding hurt. She didn't know what to believe, who to trust. She had carried the pain of her mother's betrayal for so long, had built up walls of resentment and anger, and now, faced with the two figures at the center of her childhood trauma, she felt overwhelmed, lost, adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. Martha, sensing her daughter's turmoil, decided to take a gamble, a desperate attempt to break through the walls, to reach Sarah's heart. She gestured towards the sepia-toned quilt, the one she had created for the exhibition, the one that held the secrets of her past, the symbols of her regrets, her hopes for the future. "Sarah," she said, her voice trembling, "look at this quilt. Look closely." Sarah, hesitant at first, stepped towards the quilt, her eyes scanning the intricate patterns, the vintage embellishments, the faded fragments of letters. She recognized some of the fabrics, remnants of her childhood dresses, scraps from her grandmother's sewing basket. She saw the antique buttons, the lace, the familiar stitches that her mother had taught her so many years ago. As Sarah's eyes continued to scan the display, she began to notice more specific details, more personal artifacts, and she froze. Her eyes fixed on a small, almost hidden pocket, sewn into one of the quilt squares. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and gently opened the pocket. Inside, she found a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. It was a letter from her father, John, to Martha, written shortly before his death. A letter that Martha had never shown her, had never even mentioned. A letter that revealed the truth about their marriage, about Robert, about the feud, about everything. Sarah began to read, her eyes widening with each line, her heart pounding with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a growing sense of understanding. The letter revealed that John had known about Martha's affair with Robert, that he had forgiven her, that he had loved her unconditionally, despite her mistakes. It also revealed that Robert had been the one to instigate the feud, to spread lies and rumors, to manipulate the situation for his own gain. The quilt, a symbol of Martha's love and regret, had also become a vessel of truth, a key to unlocking the past, to healing the wounds, to forging a new beginning. This shocking twist serves as a revelation, forcing everyone present to slow down and finally consider all aspects. The revelation of the letter's contents sent shockwaves through the small gathering, shattering long-held beliefs, exposing hidden truths, and forcing everyone present to confront their own roles in the tangled web of relationships and resentments. Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, turned to Martha, her eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "Why, Mama?" she asked. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe all those lies?" Martha reached out to her daughter, her own eyes brimming with tears. "I was ashamed, Sarah," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I was afraid. I didn't want you to hate me." Sarah shook her head, her anger giving way to a profound sadness. I did hate you, Mama, she said. For so long. But I also missed you. I also loved you. She looked at the letter in her hand, then back at Martha, her expression softening, a glimmer of forgiveness flickering in her eyes. She takes a step closer to Martha. Robert, his face a mask of fury and disbelief, tried to intervene, to salvage his shattered image, to maintain his grip on Sarah. Don't listen to her, Sarah, he said, his voice desperate, pleading. It's a lie. She's making it up. She's trying to manipulate you. But Sarah, finally seeing Robert for who he truly was, a manipulative, self-serving liar, turned on him, her voice filled with righteous anger. Get out, Robert, she said, her voice firm, resolute. Get out of my life. Get out of our town. I never want to see you again. Robert, defeated and exposed, backed away, his eyes darting from Sarah to Martha, to the faces in the crowd, his charm evaporated, his lies exposed, his power diminished. He turned and fled, disappearing into the throng of people, leaving behind a trail of shattered illusions and broken trust. But there was a third person to consider now that Martha, Sarah, and Robert had been revealed. Where did that leave David? This serves as the main tension of the story's center. As the dust settled from the confrontation with Robert and the emotional reunion with Sarah, Martha found herself facing another, more subtle, but equally significant challenge. David, her steadfast friend, her silent supporter, her confidant, seemed to withdraw, his usual warmth replaced by a guarded reserve, his easy smile replaced by a strained politeness. She sensed that her rekindled relationship with Sarah and the revelations about her past had created a distance between them, a barrier that she didn't know how to breach. She realized that David's own past, his guilt over his wife's death, his unspoken feelings for Martha, had all been stirred up by the events of the past few days. She didn't know how to address the issue, how to reassure him, how to bridge the gap that had opened up between them. One afternoon, as they were sitting in silence on the porch of the Desert Rose, David's son, Michael, arrived, his face etched with concern. He had come to town for a visit, and he had sensed the tension between his father and Martha. Dad, Michael said, his voice gentle but firm. What's going on? You seem distant. Is it something to do with Martha? David hesitated, his gaze shifting to Martha, then back to his son. He didn't want to burden Michael with his troubles, didn't want to involve him in the complicated web of emotions and relationships that had entangled him. It's nothing, Michael, he said, his voice evasive. Just old memories, stirred up by recent events. But Michael wasn't convinced. He knew his father too well, knew the subtle signs of his distress, his unspoken anxieties. Dad, he said, you've been carrying this guilt for too long. It's time to let it go. It's time to move on. It's time to be happy. He looked at Martha, his eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and encouragement. You both deserve to be happy, he said. He was talking about much more than his deceased mother or his father's lingering guilt. He was clearly speaking about his father and Martha. Michael pleads with his father to open himself up, in all aspects to tell the truth and to embrace whatever happens, happens. The tension and potential rewards builds culminating, by chapter's end, a desire for action and change. Inspired by Michael's heartfelt plea and encouraged by Sarah's tentative forgiveness, Martha decided to take a bold step, a leap of faith towards healing, towards wholeness, towards a future free from the shadows of the past. She organized a gathering, a potluck picnic at the old farm, inviting members of both sides of the feuding families, a symbolic gesture of reconciliation, a bridge across the chasm of resentment and bitterness that had divided them for so long. She knew it was a risky move, that there would be resistance, skepticism, and even outright hostility. But she was determined to try, to create an opportunity for dialogue, for understanding, for forgiveness. She sent out invitations, carefully worded, extending an olive branch, appealing to their shared history, their common humanity, their desire for peace. She prepared food, her signature dishes, the recipes that had been passed down through generations, a tangible offering of comfort, of connection, of shared heritage. She waited, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension, unsure of how many would accept her invitation, unsure of how the gathering would unfold, unsure of whether she could truly bridge the gap that had separated her family for so long. The guest list itself sets the immediate concern, along with its setting, the abandoned, yet familiar, farm. The day of the picnic arrived, overcast and cool, a hint of rain in the air, mirroring the uncertain mood, the mix of hope and trepidation that filled Martha's heart. She set up tables under the old oak tree, the same tree where Sarah had buried her pet hamster, the same tree where she had encountered Thomas, the same tree that held so many memories, both joyful and painful. Slowly, tentatively, people began to arrive, some hesitant, some curious, some openly skeptical. Martha greeted them warmly, her smile genuine, her eyes searching for signs of acceptance, of forgiveness, of a willingness to move forward. She saw Sarah arrive with Thomas, a small but significant gesture of support, a signal that the healing process had begun. She saw David arrive with Michael, his presence a source of comfort, of strength, of unwavering friendship. She saw other members of the feuding families, their faces etched with a mixture of emotions, their bodies tense with anticipation, their hearts uncertain about the future. As people gathered, shared food, and engaged in hesitant conversations, the atmosphere began to shift, the tension easing, the ice melting, the barriers slowly crumbling. The echoes around the farm began to change. As the picnic progressed, Martha noticed small but significant gestures of reconciliation, tentative steps towards healing and understanding. Cousins who hadn't spoken in years were sharing stories, laughing together, finding common ground. Children from both sides of the feud were playing together, their innocent joy bridging the gap that had separated their families for so long. Even Thomas, initially reserved and skeptical, seemed to relax, his guard lowering, his heart softening. But there were also whispers, undercurrents of resentment, lingering doubts and suspicions. Some members of the community, hardened by years of conflict, found it difficult to let go of the past, to forgive and forget. They huddled in small groups, their voices low, their eyes darting towards Martha, towards Sarah, towards David, their words laced with skepticism and mistrust. Martha knew that the healing process would be long and arduous, that there would be setbacks and challenges along the way. But she was encouraged by the progress she had seen, by the small acts of kindness, by the tentative steps towards reconciliation. She believed that, with time, with patience, with perseverance, the feud could be truly healed, the community could be reunited, and the wounds of the past could finally be closed. As the afternoon wore on, Martha found herself standing alone for a moment, gazing out at the fields of wheat that surrounded the farm, their golden stalks swaying gently in the breeze. She felt a presence beside her, and turned to see David, his face etched with a mixture of emotions, his eyes searching hers. "It's a beautiful day, Martha," he said, his voice soft, his tone hesitant. "You've done a good thing here." She smiled, a bittersweet smile, acknowledging the progress they had made, but also aware of the challenges that still lay ahead. "It's a start, David," she said. "But it's not enough." He nodded, understanding her unspoken meaning, the lingering questions, the unresolved emotions that still hung between them. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm, reassuring. "We'll get there, Martha," he said. "Together." Their unspoken, shared moment serves as another connection between them, as two solitary individuals seeking change. Despite the overall positive atmosphere of the picnic, a simmering tension remained, fueled by the unresolved issues, the unspoken truths, and the lingering resentments that had festered for years. Martha knew that a true reconciliation, a lasting peace, would require more than just a shared meal and polite conversation. It would require honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the painful secrets that had been buried for so long. She decided to take a bold step, a risky gamble, to address the elephant in the room, to speak the truth that everyone had been avoiding. She gathered the assembled guests, her heart pounding, her voice trembling slightly. "I have something to say," she announced, her words cutting through the murmur of conversation, silencing the crowd. Something I should have said a long time ago. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the reaction, for the potential backlash, for the possibility of shattering the fragile peace they had achieved. She looked at Sarah, at Thomas, at David, at the faces of her family and friends, her neighbors and former adversaries, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice clear and strong, her gaze unwavering. "A long time ago, I made a terrible mistake that hurt a lot of people. I betrayed my husband, I betrayed my family, I betrayed my community." She paused, letting her words sink in, feeling the weight of their judgment, the sting of their disapproval. But she continued, her voice gaining strength, her resolve hardening. "I had an affair with Robert," she confessed, the name hanging in the air, a symbol of the pain, the betrayal, the feud that had divided them for so long. It was wrong, it was selfish, and it caused irreparable damage. "I'm not proud of it, and I'm deeply sorry for the hurt I caused." She looked at Sarah, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. "Especially you, Sarah," she said. "I failed you as a mother. I let my own desires, my own weaknesses, come between us. And I've regretted it every day since." The raw and brutal honesty takes everyone by surprise. Martha's confession, raw and vulnerable, hung in the air, a silence so profound that it seemed to amplify the rustling of the leaves, the chirping of the crickets, the distant sounds of the Iowa countryside. The assembled guests, stunned by her honesty, by her willingness to expose her deepest flaws, her most painful regrets, reacted in a variety of ways. Some, hardened by years of resentment, turned away, their faces etched with disapproval, their hearts unwilling to forgive. Others, touched by her sincerity, by her courage, offered tentative gestures of support, a nod of understanding, a hand on her arm, a whispered word of encouragement. Sarah, her eyes filled with tears, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mama," she said, "it means a lot to me that you said that you finally admitted the truth." She reached out and took Martha's hand, her touch hesitant at first, then firmer, a bridge across the chasm that had separated them for so long. "It doesn't erase the past, Mama," she said, "but it helps. It helps me to understand. It helps me to forgive." Thomas was reserved but clearly showed signs of accepting Martha's apologies. Martha felt a wave of relief wash over her, a release of the tension, the guilt, the regret that had burdened her for so many years. Sarah's forgiveness, tentative as it was a balm to her wounded soul, a glimmer of hope, a promise of healing, of reconciliation, of a new beginning. David, who had been standing silently by, watching the scene unfold, his heart filled with a mixture of admiration for Martha's courage and a deep, abiding love for her, stepped forward, his eyes shining with emotion. He took Martha's other hand, his touch warm, reassuring, a silent declaration of his support, his friendship, his unwavering affection. "You're a brave woman, Martha," he said, his voice filled with tenderness. "And I'm proud to call you my friend." The moment, filled with raw emotion, forgiveness, and the blossoming of new possibilities, marked a turning point in the narrative, a shift from conflict to resolution, from estrangement to connection. With the truth finally revealed, the air cleared, and a sense of lightness, of liberation, settled over the gathering. The feud, though not completely forgotten, seemed to lose its power, its ability to divide and destroy. People began to interact more freely, more openly, sharing stories, laughter, and a renewed sense of community. But amidst the general atmosphere of reconciliation, a subtle tension remained between Martha, David, and the lingering ghost of Robert. Martha, though grateful for David's support and touched by his unspoken affection, was still processing her feelings, still navigating the complex emotions of her past, still unsure of what the future held. David, his love for Martha undeniable, was hesitant to express his feelings, fearing rejection, fearing that he would disrupt the fragile peace she had achieved with Sarah, fearing that he would somehow betray the memory of his deceased wife, Eleanor. He felt he had no right to confess feelings, let alone try to start any kind of romance with Martha. He was also, internally, battling his long-held sense of responsibility. He always blamed himself, and by extension, Martha. The past, though dealt with, needed further clarity. Another truth needed to come out. As the picnic was winding down, David found himself alone with Martha, near the old oak tree. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the fields, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He knew that he couldn't keep his feelings bottled up any longer, that he had to take a chance, to risk rejection, to speak his truth. "Martha," he began, his voice hesitant, his heart pounding, "I need to tell you something." She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "What is it, David?" she asked. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever reaction his words might provoke. "I love you, Martha," he said, his voice simple, direct, filled with a sincerity that could not be denied. "I have loved you for a long time. Ever since we were kids, playing in these fields, sharing secrets in the hayloft." Martha takes a half step backwards, a mix of emotions and consideration swirling. Martha was stunned by David's confession, her heart racing, her mind reeling. She had sensed his affection, had felt a growing connection to him, but she had never allowed herself to imagine that he might harbor such deep feelings for her. She had been so focused on her own guilt, on her estrangement from Sarah, on the lingering shadow of Robert, that she had been blind to the possibility of a new love, a new beginning with David. "David," she said, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say." He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle, reassuring. "You don't have to say anything, Martha," he said. "I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you, with myself." She looked at him, her eyes searching his, trying to understand the depth of his emotions, the sincerity of his words. She saw the love in his eyes, the tenderness, the unwavering support he had offered her throughout the years. She also saw the pain, the loneliness, the unspoken longing that mirrored her own. She began, but could not fully find a cogent response. It was perhaps all too much. Before Martha could fully process David's confession or formulate a coherent response, Sarah approached them, her expression a mixture of surprise and understanding. She had overheard David's words, and she realized, perhaps for the first time, the depth of his affection for her mother, the silent, unwavering support he had provided throughout the years. "Mama," she said, her voice soft, her eyes filled with a newfound warmth, "It's okay. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to love again." She looked at David, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "You've always been there for her, David," she said. "You've always been a good friend. A good man." She paused, then added, "I wouldn't mind having you as a stepfather." Her words, a blessing, a release, a permission to move forward, hung in the air, a testament to the healing power of forgiveness, of understanding, of love. David looks at Martha. An unspoken plea, clear as day, passes between them. The subtle complexities represent mature attitudes, especially for older characters with baggage. Martha, overwhelmed with emotion, looked from Sarah to David, her heart overflowing with gratitude, with relief, with a burgeoning hope for the future. She had spent so many years carrying the burden of her past, the guilt of her mistakes, the pain of her estrangement from her daughter. Now, finally, she felt the weight lifting, the chains breaking, the possibility of a new beginning, a new love, a new chapter in her life. She turned to David, her eyes shining with tears, her voice filled with a tenderness she had long suppressed. "David," she said, I care for you deeply, more than I ever realized." She paused, then added, her voice gaining strength, her heart filled with a newfound confidence. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'd like to find out. With you." David's face lit up, his eyes sparkling with joy, his smile radiant, erasing the years of sadness, of loneliness, of unspoken longing. He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a shiver of warmth through her, a spark of something new, something exciting, something deeply, profoundly right. Sarah, witnessing the tender exchange between her mother and David, felt a sense of peace, of contentment, of closure. She had forgiven her mother, had accepted David, had opened her heart to the possibility of a new, blended family. She stepped forward and embraced them both, a three-way hug that symbolized the healing of old wounds, the forging of new bonds, the enduring power of love and forgiveness. As they stood there, embraced in the soft glow of the setting sun, surrounded by the remnants of the picnic, by the echoes of laughter and conversation, by the tangible evidence of reconciliation and renewal, they felt a sense of gratitude, of hope, of belonging. They had weathered the storm, had faced their demons, had emerged stronger, more resilient, more united than ever before. The feud, the secrets, the lies, had all been laid bare, had lost their power to divide and destroy. They had found their way back to each other, back to love, back to the heart of their community. With the feud resolved, the family reunited, and a new love blossoming, a sense of harmony settled over the small Iowa town. The community, inspired by Martha's courage, by Sarah's forgiveness, and by David's unwavering support, began to heal, to reconnect, to rebuild the bonds that had been broken for so long. The quilt shop, the cozy corner, became a hub of activity, a gathering place for women from all walks of life, sharing stories, laughter, and the comforting rhythm of needle and thread. Martha, with Sarah's help, began offering quilting classes, passing on her skills, her knowledge, her love for the craft to a new generation. David, encouraged by Michael and Martha, started playing his cello again, not just at local events, but also for the sheer joy of it, filling the air with his beautiful music, sharing his gift with the community. He even started to compose a new song, a moving piece, reflective of a blend of loss and also intense joy. He decides he will reveal it publicly as soon as it is finished. The farm, once a symbol of division and conflict, became a place of healing and reconciliation. Martha and Sarah, working together, restored the old farmhouse, turning it into a bed and breakfast, a welcoming haven for visitors seeking a taste of rural life, a glimpse into the heartland's enduring beauty and charm. They planted a garden filled with flowers and herbs, a vibrant testament to the power of renewal, of growth, of forgiveness. Thomas, humbled by Martha's honesty and inspired by Sarah's compassion, became a regular visitor to the farm, helping with repairs, sharing meals, and gradually, tentatively, rebuilding his relationship with Martha and Sarah. The feud, though not completely forgotten, faded into the background, replaced by a growing sense of understanding, of acceptance, of shared history. The community, once divided by bitter resentment, found common ground, working together to create a brighter future, a future built on trust, respect, and a renewed appreciation for the bonds that united them. They were showing, through actions and deeds, the hard lessons they had collectively learned. The transformation of Desert Springs and the spirit of the surrounding community was not just a personal victory for Martha, Sarah, and David. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of community. It was a story that resonated throughout the county, inspiring other towns, other families, to confront their own conflicts, to heal their own wounds, to rebuild their own broken bonds. Martha's quilt shop became a destination, attracting visitors from far and wide, drawn by the beauty of her creations, by the story of her life, by the spirit of hope and renewal that permeated the air. Sarah's quilts, inspired by her mother's artistry and her own unique perspective, gained recognition, winning awards and accolades, showcasing the talent that had been nurtured in the heart of the Iowa countryside. David's music, filled with emotion, with depth, with a profound understanding of the human heart, touched the souls of all who heard it, his performances becoming highly anticipated events, drawing crowds from across the state. He even began to draw national attention. But it was the newly composed, original composition that had everyone talking. The annual county fair, once a backdrop for conflict and division, became a celebration of unity, of community, of shared heritage. Martha's quilts, displayed prominently, served as a reminder of the journey they had taken, the challenges they had overcome, the love that had endured. David's music, filling the air with its beauty and emotion, provided a soundtrack to their lives, a testament to the power of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of second chances. And, most importantly, the families that had been divided by the feud now sat together, laughed together, shared meals together, their children playing together, their hearts healed, their bonds strengthened. They had learned a valuable lesson, a lesson about the importance of communication, of understanding, of forgiveness. They had learned that the past, though it cannot be undone, does not have to define the future. They had learned that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force in the world, capable of healing even the deepest wounds, of bridging even the widest chasms, of transforming even the most bitter of enemies into the closest of friends. They learned all of this, but through lived-in action, not a preachy lesson. As the years passed, Martha and David's love deepened, their bond strengthened by the shared experiences, the challenges overcome, the triumphs celebrated. They married in a simple, intimate ceremony, surrounded by their family and friends, their vows a testament to their enduring affection, their commitment to each other, their unwavering belief in the power of second chances. Sarah, now a successful artist and businesswoman, stood by her mother's side, her heart filled with joy, with gratitude, with a profound love for the woman who had finally found her happiness. The quilt that Martha had created for Sarah, the quilt that had remained unfinished for so many years, the quilt that held the secrets of their past, was finally completed, a collaborative effort between mother and daughter, a symbol of their reconciliation, their healing, their renewed bond. They added new stitches, new fabrics, new embellishments, weaving together their shared memories, their hopes for the future, their enduring love. They donated the quilt to the local historical society, a testament to their family's journey, a reminder of the importance of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of community. The music box sat right beside it. The action of where the quilt finally ended up serves a moving reminder to never forget. Martha and David spent their golden years together, living a quiet, contented life, filled with love, laughter, and the simple pleasures of their Iowa home. They tended their garden, welcomed visitors to the desert rose, shared their stories with those who sought their wisdom, and continued to inspire their community with their unwavering spirit, their enduring love, their commitment to forgiveness and reconciliation. They often sat on the porch of the farmhouse, watching the sunsets paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, listening to the sounds of the countryside, their hands clasped together, their hearts filled with gratitude for the second chance they had been given, for the love they had found, for the life they had built together. They knew that their story, their journey, was not just their own. It was a story of hope, of healing, of the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity, to forgive mistakes, to embrace new beginnings. It was a story that would be told and retold, passed down through generations, a legacy of love, of forgiveness, of community, woven into the fabric of Iowa's heartland. In the twilight of her years, Martha, surrounded by her loving family, by her devoted husband, by the community she had helped to heal, found a profound sense of peace, of fulfillment, of completion. She had lived a long and eventful life, a life filled with challenges and triumphs, with mistakes and forgiveness, with loss and love. She had learned valuable lessons, had overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, had emerged stronger, wiser, more compassionate. She had found her voice, had shared her truth, had inspired others to do the same. She had woven a tapestry of relationships, of connections, of community, that would endure long after she was gone. She had left her mark on the world, a legacy of love, of forgiveness, of resilience, that would continue to inspire, to heal, to transform lives for generations to come. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the Iowa countryside. Martha sat on the porch of the farmhouse, David by her side, their hands clasped together, their hearts filled with a quiet joy, a deep and abiding love. She looked out at the fields of wheat, at the rolling hills, at the distant horizon, her eyes filled with a sense of gratitude, of acceptance, of profound peace. She felt the gentle breeze caress her face, carrying the scent of freshly tilled earth, of blooming flowers, of the memories of a lifetime. She heard the distant sound of music, David's cello, playing a soft, melancholic melody, a song of love, of loss, of forgiveness. She closed her eyes, and she could almost see the faces of those she had loved, those she had lost, those she had forgiven, those who had forgiven her. She felt their presence, their love, their support, surrounding her, embracing her, comforting her. She knew that she was not alone, that she had never been alone, that she would always be connected to them, to her family, to her community, to the heartland that had nurtured her, shaped her, sustained her. She opened her eyes, and she smiled, a gentle, peaceful smile, filled with the wisdom of years, with the acceptance of mortality, with the enduring power of love. She squeezed David's hand, her touch conveying a lifetime of emotions, of gratitude, of affection, of unwavering commitment. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her body frail but her spirit strong, her heart filled with the peace that surpasses all understanding. And as the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in a breathtaking tapestry of colors, Martha breathed her last, her soul taking flight, soaring into the vast expanse of the Iowa sky, leaving behind a legacy of love, of forgiveness, of enduring hope. The scene serves our peaceful closure. Epilogue. Years after Martha's passing, the farm remained a beacon of hope and healing. Sarah, taking over the reins of the bed and breakfast, continued her mother's legacy, welcoming guests with warmth and sharing the story of their family's journey. The community garden flourished, a testament to Martha and David's vision, and a constant reminder of the power of unity and forgiveness. David continued to play, eventually teaching his skills to young students. The quilt shop, the cozy corner, still thrived, managed by a young woman who had been mentored by Martha. And the quilt, the one that held the secrets of the past and the promise of the future, remained on display at the local historical society, a reminder to all who saw it that even the most broken relationships can be mended, that forgiveness is always possible, and that love, in all its forms, is the most enduring legacy of all. The town, too, healed, growing and prospering, carrying forward the lessons they had learned.